Joining us now, Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman. She recently returned from a trip to Europe, meetings with United States allies following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And I guess I first would like to ask you about the peace talks. Are we concerned that they are really just biding time so they can refuel, regroup, and assault again?
Mika and Joe, thank you for having me this morning. And that was a very powerful piece by Richard Engel about the devastation and the civilian death. Look, we all want peace talks to go forward. What we are seeing is Vladimir Putin's war of choice, war of carnage, is continuing. There is no sign that he has pulled back in any way from these incredibly deliberate attacks on civilians in Ukraine. We hope that every nation around the world, with any sway they have, is telling Vladimir Putin to end this war of choice and give the Ukrainian people their future back. It is a horrifying situation. This morning, the President of the United States will be on the phone with Xi Jinping, the President of the People's Republic of China, urging him to use his influence with Vladimir Putin to end this horrible war.
You know, Wendy, the administration had understandably taken great care in not using the term war criminal against Vladimir Putin because, of course, far more difficult to negotiate a settlement or a peace if somebody thinks they're going to end up in The Hague. But over the past several days, the President of the United States has called Vladimir Putin a war criminal. Yesterday, the Secretary of State did the same. Talk about that. And how does the United States negotiate with a war criminal? And if this war comes to an end, hopefully, how do we deal with him in the future?
All good questions, Joe. You know, who cannot look at those photographs that we have all seen and not say that Vladimir Putin is intentionally targeting civilians, which makes these actions war crimes? That said, there is a legal standard that has to be met of intentionality, and there has to be evidence collected, which we are in the process of doing to help those in the international system actually say that these are war crimes. So you heard from the President, you heard from the Secretary of State, you are hearing from me that, like every other person on the face of the earth looking at these photos, who cannot think that these are war crimes? But we are collecting the evidence, making sure that this is real and that it can stand up in legal courts. Now, in terms of negotiations, this is a negotiation between Ukraine, President Zelensky, and President Putin. We want to support Ukraine in whatever they want to do. From the very start of this, Secretary Blinken has said nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. And that, of course, is the most fundamental thing when it comes to waging peace. Any result here has to be something the Ukrainian people want for themselves.
So Winnie, I'm curious, as the President talks to President Xi this morning, we all obviously have been deeply concerned by the growing authoritarianism in China, whether you look at the crackdown in Hong Kong, you look at the Uyghurs and the concentration camps there. That said, again, though, as Kissinger said, you know, you rarely have a choice between good and evil. We've got to deal with the Chinese, not just on Ukraine, but also on climate change. So the question is, what do we have to offer President Xi to step in and try to bring this crisis to an end, try to bring this war to an end, given the fact that both Republicans and Democrats, one of the few things they seem to agree on is that China is an outlaw on the world stage?
So, Joe, this entire process is about principles, a rules-based order that we all agree to. And that is that we respect sovereignty, territorial integrity, the right of countries to make their own political choices, their own choices about their future. Xi Jinping has said for years that he believes in these principles. That is what his whole litany has been about. So now it is a moment for him to prove that. By telling Vladimir Putin to end this war of choice, this war of carnage. In terms of what we have, I don't want to get ahead of the president. They're assessing each other and having this conversation. Last one was in November virtually. We want to see where Xi Jinping is. We hope that he chooses the right side of history here, that he ends this carnage, these attacks on civilians. And indeed, the PRC is a very important, very great nation. There's no question about it. I went to Shenzhen to meet with the Chinese a few months ago. Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, met with Yang Jiechi in Rome just recently. Secretary Blinken talks to Foreign Minister Wang Yi on a regular basis. We are all very candid, very direct about what has to happen here, what great powers must do, what the responsibility is of Xi Jinping if he wants to be a true leader on the world stage, if he wants to sign up to the principles of the UN Charter, which he says he does. So we will see whether, in fact, Xi Jinping makes the right choice here. His future is with the United States, with Europe, with developing countries around the world. His future is not with Russia and Vladimir Putin.
Madam Deputy Secretary, good morning. It's Jonathan Lemire. I wanted to get your reaction to two things that might hint at a Russian escalation. We had the airstrike earlier this week, just a few miles from the Polish border, a NATO country, and some breaking news just in the last few minutes. Foreign Minister Lavrov gave an interview to RT and said that any foreign supplies to Ukraine containing military equipment would be considered, quote, legitimate targets for Russian attacks. And that, of course, these could be NATO allies in those convoys bringing equipment over. What's your response to these threats?
Well, actually, Jonathan, good morning. Good to see you. Lavrov made the same comment several days ago, really threatening the convoys that are coming across with the lethal weapons that and supplies and humanitarian needs that Ukraine needs so badly. There is no question that if those convoys are attacked on NATO territory in Poland or anywhere else, as the President of the United States has said, we will support our NATO allies to every inch of their territory, to every person in those countries. That is our solemn responsibility as a member of NATO. So these are threats that are coming to try to deter us from supporting the Ukrainian people. Nothing is going to stop us from standing with Ukraine.
All right, Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.